Hoş geldiniz. Hepimize günaydın diyorum. Aramızda bulunan Birleşmiş Milletler'den, Avrupa Konseyi'nden, Avrupa Birliği'nden, Türkiye'deki kamu kurumlarından, sivil toplum kuruluşlarından, belediyelerden, akademiden çok değerli yetkililere ve temsilcilere teşekkür ediyorum. Uluslararası Cinsiyet, Çeşitlilik ve Sosyal İçerme Konferansı'nın açılış konuşmasını yapmak üzere Birleşmiş Milletler Bakım Koordinatörü Sayın Kamal Malhotra'yı kürsüye davet ediyorum.
Excellencies, distinguished members of the Turkish and European parliaments, members of civil society organizations and the press, colleagues, günaydın, hoş geldiniz. I believe this is a historic occasion and it is very impressive to see how full this hall is, and it is a great pleasure and honor for me to be part of this inaugural panel of the International Conference on Gender, Diversity and Social Inclusion, and to be together with all of you here today. I would like to start my remarks by quoting a key and well-known part of the United Nations Charter, and I quote, "We the peoples of the United Nations, determined to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person." End of quote. This year, in September, 70 years after the adoption of the United Nations Charter in San Francisco, the international community agreed on a new Sustainable Development Agenda with 17 Sustainable Development Goals. All 17 goals are based on a single guiding principle: to leave no one behind. Realizing this guiding principle will only be possible if we can reach all people regardless of their sexual orientation and gender identity. In most countries around the world, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and intersex people are amongst the most marginalized members of societies. We are together here today both to initiate a discussion on the barriers that prevent LGBTI people from exercising their full human rights and to identify ways to combat gender-based exclusion and violence. At the United Nations, the rights of LGBTI people are still a relatively new topic. The UN first began discussing LGBTI rights in 2008. This year, on 29 September 2015, just after the Sustainable Goals were adopted, 12 UN entities, and I list them: the ILO, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, the UNAIDS Secretariat, the United Nations Development Programme, UNESCO, the UN Population Fund, UNHCR, UNICEF, UNODC, the Office of Drugs and Crime, UN Women, the World Food Programme, and the World Health Organization, released the first ever joint UN statement on combating violence and discrimination against LGBTI people. As stated in their joint call and communique, and I quote again, "Failure to uphold the human rights of LGBTI people and protect them against abuses such as violence and discriminatory laws and practices constitute serious violations of international human rights law and have a far-reaching impact on society, contributing to increased vulnerability to ill health and including HIV infection, social and economic exclusion, putting strain on families and communities, and impacting negatively on economic growth, decent work, and progress towards achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals." End of quote. At the national level, acknowledging the need to combat gender-based violence in a systematic and sustainable manner, the United Nations in Turkey has made gender equality and empowerment one of the four main pillars of its forthcoming United Nations Development Cooperation Strategy for the period 2016 to 2020 with the government of Turkey. One of the 8 results we set to achieve by 2020 in cooperation with the government of Turkey is improved legislation, policies, implementation and accountability mechanisms on both prevention and protection to promote gender equality and reduce all forms of sexual and gender-based violence. It is important that governments increase their efforts to protect the security and the right to life of persons regardless of their gender or sexual orientation. Acts of murder as well as death threats should be promptly and thoroughly investigated regardless of the sexual orientation of the victims. Measures should include policies and programs geared towards overcoming hatred and prejudice against homosexuals and sensitizing public officials and the general public to crimes and acts of violence directed against members of sexual minorities. Effective systems should be established for recording and reporting hate-motivated acts of violence. States should also uphold international human rights standards on non-discrimination through, first, prohibiting discrimination against LGBTI adults, adolescents, and children in all contexts, including in education, employment, healthcare, housing, social protection, criminal justice, and in asylum and detention settings. Second, combating prejudice against LGBTI people through dialogue, public education, and training. Third, ensuring that LGBTI people are consulted and participate in the design, implementation, and monitoring of laws, policies, and programs that affect them, including development and humanitarian initiatives. And fourth, advocacy for gender equality, which is crucial for social inclusion and should be undertaken within the broad human rights framework and discourse. Ladies and gentlemen, in this respect, I am pleased to note that Turkey has indicated that it is committed to fighting discrimination against LGBTI people. During the UN Human Rights Council Universal Periodic Review meeting in January 2015, Turkey accepted many of the recommendations related to LGBTI. For example, the recommendation related to ensuring that civil society actors, including marginalized groups, such as those representing LGBTI persons, should be included in the implementation and follow-up of human rights obligations enjoyed Turkey's support. Civil society organization inclusion as partners, both of governments and international organizations, is essential for the achievement of human rights-based development. In this respect, the United Nations in Turkey welcomes Turkey's efforts, and we are glad to support Turkey in its efforts to combat discrimination and violence based on gender identity and sexual orientation. Ensuring the same rights to LGBTI persons as those enjoyed by everyone else, I believe, is not as radical or as complicated as is often argued. It rests on two fundamental principles that underpin international human rights law: equality and non-discrimination. It is our obligation to ensure that everyone in society has equal access to resources, services, and rights. Addressing inequalities of opportunity and influence requires action on all fronts, but first of all, a change in the mindsets of governments and their commitment to securing the economic, social, environmental, as well as democratic rights of all individuals. It is important to note that the investments we make in eliminating intolerance and hate will bring enormous benefits across the global agenda, not to mention the well-being of our societies. In today's world, we cannot afford to leave anyone behind. Only through such efforts will we be able to create a world where all people are free and equal, as stated in the UN's Free and Equal campaign against homophobia and transphobia. Ladies and gentlemen, discrimination can never be justified and should be eliminated. The joint efforts of the international community governments, and civil society organizations are essential if we are to achieve this goal. To quote the United Nations Secretary General, His Excellency Ban Ki-moon, "Human rights are for everyone, no matter who you are and whom you love." Next week, the United Nations Secretary General will be in Turkey, and I will tell him about this first conference on this very important set of issues in Turkey. And I'm sure, as someone who supported this over his time as the UN Secretary General, he will be very pleased. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the organizers, Kaos, Gele, and the other supporters of this conference for giving us the opportunity to reiterate our commitment to social inclusion, anti-discrimination, and equality for all. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you, and I wish you all a successful conference over the next 2 days.
Sayın Mahmut Rey'e çok teşekkür ediyoruz konuşması için. Şimdi açılış konuşmalarına devam edeceğiz. Sayın Karl Kulesi'yi Birleşmiş Milletler Nüfus Fonu Türkiye temsilcisi kürsüye davet ediyorum.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much to Kamal for presenting the official position of the United Nations on this. And of course, my organization, the United Nations Population Fund, fully supports it. I will give you a more personal statement, perhaps, that I hope will complement what Kamal has already said. I have a bit of a reputation for speaking very fast, so I'll give a very quick thesis on this. Basically, my presentation will be to say that tolerance is good, but maybe we need to even go beyond that. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to address this important occasion here today. I think it presents a tremendous milestone, and I'm proud and very happy to be permitted to speak here today. Celebration of diversity and respect through social inclusion is something very dear to my heart. While German, my mother is Swedish. My 3 children are born in 3 different countries far away from Europe. English instead of German is now their first language. My partner is from Eritrea in Africa. My life and work has found me living in some 12 countries, here in Turkey for the second time. One thing at least that such diversity has taught me is not moral and cultural relativism, where anything may go, where everything seems okay, but instead it taught me to recognize a bit more the importance and magic of diversity, combined with some very distinct discomfort with moral certainty. I could have focused here today at UNFPA's position, and I would be happy to share it with you. I'm sure you can guess we fully support human rights of LGBTI people. That UNFPA believes that universal access to reproductive health is a right for all, without exception, you know already. That UNFPA supports the right to be protected against discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity, including the enjoyment of all civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights, I think, is understood. That UNFPA is also concerned about discrimination in such areas of employment, health, and education is well established. We're also concerned about discrimination of access to other basic services, such as housing and social benefits. I should add that the rights of vulnerable groups, including LGBTI populations, will be a significant component of our upcoming UNFPA 6-country program. But of course you expected all this. After all, I'm here and not anywhere else. Allow me instead, please, to backtrack in time to 2 incidents that fundamentally shaped my outlook on such rights. In the early 1980s, as a young university student at Carleton University in Ottawa, my friends and I used to go regularly to a cafe, actually a bagel restaurant, in the downtown Market area. One day I noticed this person dressed in women's clothes at the cafe. I thought, this is very silly. Why would any man wear such things? But after seeing this person a few times, I got used to his sight. Okay, his or her sight. But as time went by, I also began to wonder, what makes a person take such risks? Why would anyone risk potential humiliation, possibly intermittent violence, even social exclusion, over something as seemingly trivial a choice as clothing? a choice culturally defined after all? I could not give an answer. I could not give myself a good answer. I still cannot to my question. By that moment, at least, I grew to admire and respect that person. How could you not but admire a person who, against all ridicule, possibly violence, and at the risk of social inclusion, chooses to embrace and live these powerful personal convictions? I may not have shared any of the values or inclinations, but I could not admire the courage, but admire the courage. The courage to be visibly different and live your true feelings regardless of the potential personal cost. And no harm done to anyone else, not really anyone. Not bad. How many in the social mainstream can claim to have gone this way? It is in looking beyond the socio-cultural surface and norms to the quality of those universally shared personal attributes, including courage and humanity, that you may find in any person anywhere that tolerance can have a chance. Okay, now you have my tolerance. I generously extend to you the generosity of my being ready to endure your presence. But what does that really mean? For us working in human rights or development areas, we usually see positive meaning in the word tolerance. However, if you look, for example, at the German translation of the word for to tolerate, you get, in addition to tolerieren, words like dulden, ertragen, leiden, gefallen lassen, meaning quite interchangeably, endure, suffer, permit, condone. Because you begin to see that tolerance could also be seen as patronizing, as if those from the social mainstream extend to you the courtesy of letting you exist in their midst. Not bad, perhaps, even progress, but is it enough? Enter my second incident. Around the mid-1980s, a young man and a good friend of mine wrote an article on how he perceived his status as a gay person in his community and what he thought of the community's perception of that status. Unfortunately, not he can still trace this article, but perhaps this is not so relevant at this juncture. Instead, what matters is now how I recall it. What emerged was an assertion for the right to define his own sexual outlook independently and free from the understanding, sympathy, and endorsement of others. It was a defiant and wonderfully eloquent declaration of the right to choose and live whatever one's sexual orientation. He did not only refuse to ask for social acceptance, he rejected the very premise of looking for social blessing. He found it patronizing and indeed inappropriate that he should have to go there. I admit I was impressed, and I agreed. It fundamentally shaped my thesis about the need for a mental and intellectual platform of what I call indifference, rather than just tolerance on all matters of sexual orientation. Please do not misunderstand me here. I want indifference here to be understood as not making any moral or otherwise judgment about anyone's sexual orientation. Society should no more worry or inquire about whether a person is gay, lesbian, or transgender than it looks into whether somebody is straight. At the core, we all, it seems, inevitably sexual one way or another. How we end up defining or expressing it is a personal process or even choice. I hold that one's sexuality and sexual orientation, not necessarily sexual activities, let me be clear, and let's not confuse the two, is not really of interest to the general community. Ultimately, I hold that it's even irrelevant to any community's development and well-being. In other words, a gay or lesbian or transgender person should no more have to explain his or her status in public than does a straight person. In retrospect, it seems almost a bit unfortunate that a gay person, lesbian or transgender, or the movement should have been compelled by hostile circumstances to bother in the first place. Hence my advocacy here for indifference on this matter, even as I fully realize that this term contains a good deal of ambiguity. I recognize that all this is, of course, a bit ideal or normative. I know it is not easy. The transition to indifference, and with it full assimilation, without discrimination and without questions asked about where may seem strange to the mainstream of society, is not obvious. We tend to carry too much moral and cultural baggage around to make this an easy path. Admittedly, for me as well, it is a continued journey. Finally, let me thank the organizers for hosting this extraordinary event. I welcome all our international guests joining us here today. I would like to thank especially the many representatives from government who have agreed to be here today. It is a big step, and I thank you for taking it. I wish you all great success for the remainder of this important conference. Thank you very much.
Sayın Kulesi'ye de teşekkür ediyoruz konuşması için. Şimdi Avrupa Konseyi İnsan Hakları Komiseri Nils Muižnieks konferansımız için, katılımcıları için göndermiş olduğu video mesajını hep birlikte izleyeceğiz ve dinleyeceğiz.
Recognition of the true diversity of gender is essential for LGBTI people. Discrimination and hate experienced by LGBTI persons is often based on stereotypical expectations for gender roles which don't reflect reality. The social inclusion of LGBTI persons must also, therefore, address gender stereotypes in society. Hate crime against LGBTI people remains a grim reality across Europe. For example, 94 killings of trans and gender diverse people have been documented in 14 European countries since data collection started in 2008. Turkey holds the highest figure in Europe. 37 trans people were killed, followed by 28 people in Italy. LGBTI individuals are not the only targets. Pride events and offices of NGOs have also been subject to violent attacks. In January, I raised concerns about the safety of members of the NGO Identoba in Georgia after they received death threats. In June, I expressed my dismay at the violent police crackdown on the Istanbul Pride, despite the fact that 1 year before, the event had taken place peacefully. All these cases of killings and violence against LGBTI people should be promptly investigated, prosecuted, and sanctioned. Authorities have to send a strong message in condemning such crimes. Police should provide adequate protection to Pride events and not attack peaceful assemblies themselves. Naturally, we should not forget to address the root causes of intolerance and violence against LGBTI people. If public opinion is hostile to them, governments have the responsibility to raise awareness. Education plays a central role in changing attitudes and as a means for social inclusion. Schools should be a safe environment for all. Confronting intimidation against LGBTI people requires continuous and focused attention. School children also have the right to receive factual information about sexuality and gender diversity so that they can question the stereotypes in this area. Today, most Europeans are unaware of the often painful personal histories of intersex people. The supposed dichotomy of sex or gender and the corresponding medical norms have led to routine medical and surgical interventions on intersex children without their consent. Secrecy and shame surrounding intersex bodies has permitted the perpetuation of these practices. For this reason, I published an issue brief on human rights of intersex people in May. I urge governments to end medically unnecessary so-called normalizing treatments of intersex persons without their free and fully informed consent. I also proposed measures to protect them against discrimination and to facilitate legal recognition of sex and gender. It's time to put the human rights challenges of intersex people on the European agenda. I wish you all the best in your discussions during this conference. I think it's important that this debate is taking place in Turkey, where a truly grassroots LGBTI rights movement has developed and has been doing outstanding work with no support from the authorities. I remain an ally of this movement, and I will continue to uphold the human rights of LGBTI people in my work. Thank you.
Avrupa Konseyi Parlamenter Meclisi LGBT Hakları Genel Raportörü Sayın Jonas Gunnarsson'u kürsüye davet ediyorum konuşmasını yapmak için.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Distinguished guests, dear colleagues, friends. Last July, people around the world watched with dismay and horror as the streets of Ankara were peppered with anti-gay death threats posters, and a transgender activist was attacked and raped in his home. 47 homophobic and transphobic murders were recorded in Turkey between 2010 and 2014. Politicians here have, in recent years, described homosexuality as a disease, a position expressly rejected by the World Health Organization already in 1991. They have stigmatized lesbians and gays as having lifestyles disapproved of by our people, and accused homosexuals of having caused the destruction of the tribe of Lot. A phrase that shortly afterwards turned up combined with death threats in the posters I mentioned just recently. Unfortunately, such acts are not isolated. Around the world, people who do not conform to the gender stereotypes that our societies have constructed and reproduced for centuries, LGBTI people are targets of vicious hate crimes, hate speech, and discrimination. Even in countries where there has been huge progress towards gender equality, discrimination based on gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, and sex characteristics remains rife. The themes of our conference here in Ankara today: gender diversity and social inclusions. If we take them separately, it sounds like simple notions, but when we put them together, it seems the world falls apart. That is why this conference is a conversation we need to have. And that is why it is important and encouraging to see so many representatives of Turkish public institutions here, ready to participate in this conversation. Our job here is threefold. First, we must recognize and understand the mechanisms that lead society to reject and discriminate against people whose gender identity or sexual orientations do not fit prevailing norms. Second, we must acknowledge the devastating effects that such reaction, discrimination, and exclusion have on ordinary human beings every day of their lives. And third, most importantly and urgently of all, we must find ways to turn the situation around. Let me start with the first part, the mechanisms of reaction, discrimination, and exclusion. Throughout Europe, entire societies have been constructed around two incredibly powerful norms: heterosexuality and binary male and female roles. These norms are so strong that most of us have internalized them. Women who are competitive are considered unfeminine. Men who stay home to look after their children are seen as lacking masculinity. Men and women who are not heterosexual are discriminated against, harassed, and physically attacked. Researchers have worked for decades to deconstruct these norms, but stereotypes still abound, and people who do not fit them are subjected to enormous pressure to conform. Why is this so? Today there are and have been openly lesbian or gay prime ministers in Iceland, Belgium, Luxembourg, and neither of these countries have fallen apart. Paris have had a gay mayor for more than 13 years, and it's a still healthy and rather functioning city. There is a transgender senator in Belgium. Apple, one of the most powerful companies in the world, has a gay CEO, and I could go on with endless examples. But the point, of course, is this. We know and we can see that the LGBT people are not a threat to society. Still, we need to go a step further. We must acknowledge that the real threat to society is posed not by different sexual orientations or gender identities, but by discrimination and exclusion. This brings me to our second concern, the effects of rejection, discrimination, and exclusion on their victims. I began by giving a very few examples of hate speech and hate crimes recently directed against LGBT people. In the UN context, Ban Ki-moon has, as already mentioned, has also emphasized that gay, lesbian, and transgender people around the world suffer disproportionate discrimination and abuse. These may come from all sides. Often the first perpetrators of homophobia or transphobia are families, friends, and colleagues. These are often the people in whom their victims have placed the most trust, yet they reject the other's sexual orientation or gender identity through anything from casual words or attitudes to deliberate bullying or harassment. Outside their immediate circle, transgender people are often rejected when they apply for jobs, or fired when they reveal that they are transgender. Same-sex couples are refused access to bars or suddenly told that the hotel where they had booked a room is full. These are just a few examples. Some political leaders and media outlets, moreover, relay and amplify homophobic and transphobic ideas, thereby multiplying the impact of intolerance and reinforcing the prejudices that exist in society. Finally, discrimination, hate speech, and hate crimes may also come from anonymous perpetrators in the street or on the internet. Last week, a young man in Belarus died of the injuries he sustained in a homophobic attack on the street. In Argentina, 3 transgender women have been murdered in the last month. Wherever they fit on the scale between the mildest form of discrimination and the most heinous criminal offences, all forms of homophobic and transphobic speech and actions reject individuals on the basis of an inalienable, highly personal characteristics. As such, they have a devastating impact on their victims. Suicide rates among LGBT people, especially the young, are disproportionately high. So too are the rates of homelessness and poverty. Dear friends, we cannot tolerate that some members of society continue to be marginalized, excluded, and the targets of violence because who we are. LGBT people are born free and equal to all other people in dignity. We should never have to hide. It is not LGBT people who must conform to others. It is our societies that must learn to ensure that all persons can express their sexual orientation or gender identity without fear. This brings me to our third and most important challenge: what we can do, what we must do, and to turn this situation around. In our public or professional roles, whether as parliamentarians, civil servants, prosecutors, police, officers, judges, journalists, teachers, service providers, tradespeople, NGOs, or whatever, each of us has a vital role to play. In the Council of Europe's Parliamentary Assembly, we began calling in the 1980s for an end to discrimination against LGBT people. And we have confirmed our commitments to this stance in numerous texts adopted since then. I will be speaking more at the next session about the Assembly's resolutions in this field. But for now, let me quickly flag up a few key points that are crucial to achieving genuine equality for LGBT people. There must be adequate legislation against homophobic and transphobic hate crimes and hate speech. And victims of such offences must have access to effective remedies. Anti-discrimination legislation must be applicable to discriminations on grounds of sexual orientation and gender identity. And again, there must be effective remedies when such discrimination occurs. Education and training are crucial, both in preventing hate crimes and discrimination, and in handling cases effectively when they occur. Freedom of expression and freedom of assembly must be protected. Teachers must be adequately trained to handle issues of gender, diversity, and social inclusion. The specific situation of transgender people must be addressed. Parliamentarians and other political leaders must take a leading role in spreading a message of acceptance of diversity, not exclusion or hate. Ladies and gentlemen, the above is just not a snapshot, but as Ban Ki-moon has reminded the UN, as the world looks towards achieving sustainable development goals in the 21st century, we cannot afford to leave groups of people behind. The consequences of exclusion are far greater than the challenges involved in promoting and achieving equality and inclusion, both for society and for marginalized groups such as LGBT people still are far too often. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, this conference is vital for two reasons. First of all, it gives voice to LGBT people here in Turkey. It says we exist and we are not afraid to say so. Against the background of hate crimes, hate speech and discrimination that I described earlier, the importance of this statement cannot be stressed too much. Second, it focuses on the intersection of three defining themes: gender diversity and social inclusion. The thrust of this discussion is how to create the basic preconditions to enable all members of society to live their life on an equal footing with everyone else, whether their gender, sexual orientation, or gender identity. It is not about inventing special rights for LGBT people. It's about achieving genuine and effective equality for all. I would like to salute the conference organizers for their intensive and dedicated work in bringing us all together here to address these vital issues. I would also like to warmly congratulate CoE GL as joint winners of this year's International Hrant Dink Award, in recognition of your persistent and effective and efficient struggle for LGBT rights in Turkey. I wish everyone a fruitful conference, and I look forward to our discussion in the coming panel. And thank you for you have listened to me.
Sayın Gunarson'a teşekkür ediyoruz. Şimdi Birleşik Krallık Büyükelçisi Sayın Richard Moore'u konuşması için davet ediyorum.
Sayın Ekselansları, Sayın Milletvekili, Sayın değerli basın mensupları ve de değerli katılımcılar, günaydın. Uluslararası Cinsiyet, Çeşitlilik ve Sosyal İçerme Konferansı'nda bulunmaktan duyduğum memnuniyetimi ifade etmek isterim. Bugün özellikle İngiltere Büyükelçisi olarak Colin Howard Lloyd, Muhafazakar Parti LGBT Grup Başkanı ve Stonewall Uluslararası Siyaset Uzmanı Kit Dory bizlerle birlikte olduğu için gerçekten çok mutluyum. Özellikle Kit'in burada olmaktan çok mutluyum. Çünkü Kit çok yakın bir dostumun oğludur. Çok özel bir memnuniyetle karşılaşıyorum. Hassas gruplarının korunması her toplum için çok yüksek öneme sahip bir konu olmaya sürdürüyor. Hepimizin bildiği gibi ne yazık ki homofobi ve transfobi yaygın bir küresel problemdir. Tüm dünyada LGBTİ bireyler cinsel yönelim ve cinsiyet kimliklerine yönelik ayrımcılık sebebiyle hala insan hakkı ihlallerine uğruyor ve nefret suçlarının mağduru oluyor. Devletler cinsel yönelim ve cinsiyet kimlikleri her ne olursa olsun tüm vatandaşlarının uluslararası normlar uyarınca sosyal ve hukuki olarak tüm haklardan, korumadan ve fırsat eşitliğinden faydalanabilmelerini temin etmeye çalışmalıdırlar. Müsaadenizle İngiltere'nin tecrübesini hakkında birkaç ayrıntılara sunmak istiyorum. Çünkü bizim seyahatimizi anlatmak istiyorum. Eşitlik, Britanya hükümetinin yol gösterici ilkelerimiz olan özgürlük, adalet ve sorumluluk kavramlarını daha da güçlendiren politikalarının merkezinde yer almaktadır. Birleşik Krallık hükümeti lezbiyen, gay, biseksüel ve trans bireyler için eşitlik çalışma planını 2011 yılında yayınladı. Bu LGBT hakları ile ilgili hükümet genelinde yayınlanan ilk çalışma planlarıydı. Belge, Birleşik Krallığın LGBT bireylere eşit davranılmama sorununa karşı tüm hükümet birimleri bünyesinde neler yapacağını açıklıyor. Birleşik Krallık'ta son yıllarda LGBT eşitliği konusunda çok büyük ilerleme sağlandı ve bu kutlanması gereken bir başarı. Tabii bu uzun ve zorlu bir süreç oldu ve yol boyunca pek çok haksızlıkla karşılaştık. Ama bugün eşcinselliğin ölüm cezasıyla sonuçlanabilecek bir suç sayıldığı bir ülke olmaktan 2013 eşcinsel evliliği yasası ile 2014 yılında İngiltere ve Galler'de eşcinsel evliliği yasal kılan bir ülke haline gelmiş olduğumuzu söylemekten gurur duyuyorum. Eşcinsel evliliğinin İskoçya'da meşru kılanmasına ilişkin yasa ise Şubat 2014'te İskoçya parlamentosundan geçti. 12 Mart 2014'te kraliyet onayı aldı ve 16 Aralık 2014'te de yürürlüğe girdi. Bu alanda yaşanan bir başka önemli an ise Kraliçe 2. Elizabeth'in Londra Lezbiyen ve Gay Yardım Hattı'nın 40 yıllık çalışmalarına övmesi oldu ki bu kraliyet ailesinin LGBT'nin camiasına halka açık bir şekilde desteklediği ilk andı. Kraliçe yardım hattına gönderdiği mesajda şunları söyledi. Son derece özel olan bu yıl dönümünde ilgili herkesi kutluyor ve hepsine en iyi dileklerimi iletiyorum. Ama tabii ki rehavette kapılmamamız lazım. Okullarımızda yaşanan homofobik kabadayılıklardan nefret suçuyla işlenen trajik olaylara kadar pek çok şekilde çok fazla lezbiyen, gay, biseksüel ve trans birey hayatlarının hemen her döneminde cinsel yönelimleri veya cinsiyet kimlikleri nedeniyle çağ dışı önyargılarla karşı karşıya kalıyor. Sosyal içerme için toplumun tüm kademelerinde tutumun değişmesi gerekiyor. Elçilik olarak son 13 yıldır Chaos GL'deki dostlarımızı bu konferansta dahil pek çok projede destekleyebilmiş olmaktan büyük bir memnuniyet duyuyoruz. Chaos GL'nin programlarında kamu kurumlarıyla işbirliği ve diyalog kurulması, ilgili paydaşların bilgi kapasitelerinin güçlendirilmesi ve siyasal kaynaştırma gibi nosyonlara çok büyük bir önem verdiğinin altına çizmek gerek. Bir başka ifadeyle, Chaos GL, LGBT konusunu sadece kimliğe dayalı yaklaşımlar yerine tüm siyasal, yasal ve kültürel bağlamı değerlendirerek ele alan önemli kuruluşlardan biri. Ben de bu fırsattan istifade ile bu konferansının gerçekleştirilmesinde emeği geçen herkesi tebrik ediyorum ve konferansın bu önemli konuda çok daha olumlu ilerleme sağlayabilecek verimli görüşmeler için güzel bir platform sunması diliyorum. Hepinize teşekkürler.
Sayın Muğur'a teşekkür ediyoruz. Şimdi konuşmasını yapmak üzere Avrupa Birliği Türkiye Delegasyonu Başkan Yardımcısı Sayın Bere Sombati'yi kürsüye davet ediyorum.
Dear General Rapporteur, dear Ambassador of the United Kingdom, representatives of the UNDP, UNFPA, dear colleagues and friends in the audience, members of parliament, representatives of government, NGOs, CSOs, the media, all participants. I'm pleased to represent the EU and the EU delegation at the opening of the International Conference on Gender, Diversity and Social Inclusion. This event is part of a broader project funded under the European Instrument for Democracy and Human Rights, EIDHR, and implemented by Chaos GL, contributing to Turkish legislation and national as well as local policies regarding human rights of LGBTI individuals. I want to thank the organizers and sponsors of the event as well as participants contributing to discussions on these matters of outstanding importance. Since its creation, the European Union has considered the fight against discrimination as one of its crucial missions. non-discrimination, is embedded in our treaty and in our Charter of Fundamental Rights. For many years, the emphasis was on preventing discrimination on grounds of nationality or gender. Since 1999, the EU's powers have included action against discrimination on grounds of racial or ethnic origin, religion or belief, disability, age, or sexual orientation. In this area, more than any other, civil society organizations have a crucial role to play in promoting, advocating, and defending the rights to non-discrimination in all its aspects and forms. EU law prohibits discrimination on the grounds of sexual orientation, but the full enjoyment of human rights by LGBTI people is often not realized in practice because of deeply held prejudices in many countries. Many challenges remain in this area within the EU as well as in the rest of the world. We actively promote the enjoyment of human rights by LGBTI people, not only within the European Union, but also around the world, via different instruments at our disposal in our external action. In the context of enlargement of the European Union, human rights, including the rights of LGBTI people, form an integral part of the Copenhagen political criteria for accession and of the EU legal framework for combating discrimination. These aspects are closely monitored by the European Union, which reports annually on the progress made by enlargement countries. In Turkey, the number of LGBTI organizations has increased during the past few years. Allow me to underline here that the EU is aware of and supports the important role representatives of civil society play in promoting greater respect of the rights of LGBTI individuals. At the same time, most regrettably, hate crimes, attacks, and murder, in particular against transgender persons, have continued. Therefore, besides the strong and undeniable need for further efforts to provide equal access to education and employment opportunities, we believe that the alignment of the current legal framework with the EU acquis and its full implementation is extremely important. The adoption of a comprehensive anti-discrimination legislation, including the establishment of an anti-discrimination and equality board with references to discrimination on grounds of sexual identity and sexual orientation, remains crucial. The EU is supporting civil society organizations active in this area in Turkey and worldwide. The EIDHR provides financial support to human rights organizations in their fight against discrimination based on any grounds, including sexual orientation. The rights of vulnerable groups, including LGBTIs, are among its core priorities. In June 2013, the guidelines to promote and protect the enjoyment of all human rights by lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and intersex persons were adopted by the EU, helping officials of the EU institutions and member states in contacts with third countries, international and civil society organizations in promoting and protecting the human rights of LGBTI persons. I want to mention here the particularly difficult situation of LGBTI human rights defenders. We are fully aware of the hurdles they face in their difficult work. This is why the EU delegation, together with the diplomatic missions of the member states, adopted in 2011 an EU local strategy to support and defend human rights defenders. This is a commitment to provide effective support to human rights defenders and to monitor closely their situation. In the framework of this strategy, regular meetings take place with EU missions, human rights defenders, and NGOs, and contact points have been designated in the EU delegation to offer assistance to human rights defenders when necessary. As part of this strategy, EIDHR is supporting human rights defenders, including LGBTI human rights defenders, both the individuals and the organizations. Kaos Gele has long been a reliable partner in our programs, and others present in this room also have a history of cooperation with the EU. As you know, specific resources are allocated every year for this purpose. This international conference is testimony to the invaluable efforts of many individuals and organizations internationally, in the European Union and in Turkey, to fight discrimination and promote a culture of respect and mutual understanding. It also allows for the matter to be put into the broader context of the path towards gender equality and social inclusion. I trust that the discussions you will have will reach the decision makers as well as the broader public, promoting tolerance. I wish you very good and fruitful discussions and look forward to the conclusions of your conference. And if I may end on a more personal note, when I arrived in Turkey 3 years ago, one of the first events I participated in was an event on the rights of LGBTI persons organized by none other than Kaos Gele. That was 3 years ago. And I'm here today again at another event on the rights of LGBTI persons and on their inclusion in society organized by Kaos Gele. So you may think I've gone a full circle, but I have to add it's a virtuous circle, not my virtue, but the virtue of the changing situation in Turkey. When I had a short discussion before we started here with Murat Bey, he mentioned to me that looking at the articles in mainstream newspapers and mainstream media as well about the rights of LGBTI persons and about LGBTI persons, generally speaking, have become much, much more positive. He said something like 70% of the articles being positive, whereas a few years ago it was much, much below 50%. So there is, in spite of some of the setbacks, and one of these was, of course, the Gay Pride March last year in Istanbul, which never took place. And I have to add that I specifically traveled to Istanbul to represent the EU and the EU delegation in that march. So we do have setbacks, but we do have progress as well. And I think it is these setbacks that make your struggle so important. And it is this progress that I mentioned that make our efforts, our common efforts, and our cooperation worthwhile. Thank you for your attention.
Sayın Sombatı'ya biz teşekkür ediyoruz. Şimdi son olarak İsveç Kültür ve Demokrasi Bakanı Sayın Alice Bah Kuhnke'nin konferansımız için gönderdiği video mesajını izleyeceğiz.
My name is Alice Bah Kuhnke, and as the Minister for Culture and Democracy, I am responsible for LGBT equality on a national level in the Swedish government. I am honored to be part of this opening ceremony for the International Conference on Gender, Diversity and Social Inclusion. One of my most important missions as Minister for Culture and Democracy is to strive to achieve an inclusive, diverse society where everyone can live their lives in freedom and have their rights promoted and protected. Unfortunately, as we all know, this is not always the case, not in Sweden or in many other countries. Hate crime against LGBTI persons is far too frequent, and discrimination against persons on the basis of their sexual orientation or gender identity is still far too common. As reported by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, violence motivated by homophobia and transphobia is often particularly brutal, and hate-motivated killings of LGBT individuals have been documented in all regions around the world. Studies and reports in Sweden show that hate crimes, discrimination and intolerance affect the health of LGBT persons. Furthermore, LGBT persons reportedly have a lower degree of trust towards other people and institutions in society, and the risk of suicide attempts and suicide is higher amongst LGBT persons. This is completely unacceptable, and we cannot stay silent when intolerance results in hate crimes and young people taking their own life. We need to tackle hate crimes and discrimination. There is no doubt about that. But if we are to make real and long-term progress, we also need to challenge gender stereotypes and harmful gender norms that limit people in living their lives free from discrimination and violence and being able to enjoy their human rights and fulfill their true potential. This is why this conference is so important, to discuss and share experience on how we can get one step closer to a society where everyone is able to live their lives in freedom, irrespective of sexual orientation, gender, identity, or expression. On a global level, regional level, and national level, Sweden stands firm in supporting the equal rights of LGBTI persons, and we do the same in Turkey. Sweden has a long-standing cooperation with CHAOS GL. CHAOS GL are not only the organizer of this event, but also one of the country's oldest and most vocal advocates of equal rights of LGBTI persons in Turkey. I am very proud that Sweden supports this organization, and I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate their dedicated and courageous right-based work for LGBTI individuals in Turkey. On this note, I leave you with wishes for a conference full of inspiration, hope, and plans for action. Thank you for listening.
Sayın Kunke ve ilk konuşmacıdan itibaren bütün değerli konuşmacılarımıza tekrar teşekkür ediyoruz. Ayrıca CoE and EU Derneği olarak bu konferansın düzenlenmesinde destekleri olan Birleşmiş Milletler Nüfus Fonu'na, Avrupa Birliği'ne, İngiltere Büyükelçiliği'ne, SİDA'ya, İsveç'e, Açık Toplum Vakfı'na teşekkür ediyoruz. Şimdi 15 dakikalık bir ara vereceğiz. 15 dakikalık aramızdan sonra panelimiz olacak. Ve tabii ki en çok size teşekkür ediyoruz. Bunu unutmadan söyleyeyim, burada olduğunuz için.